Have you ever felt like the world was standing still, like time had paused just long enough for your soul to breathe? That's how Sergeant Miles Fielding described life in Pendle Ash, a village so tucked away in Lancashire that even Google Maps took a second to catch up. Miles had been with the local police for over 7 years. He was 33, tall, soft-spoken, with the kind of presence that made people feel safe without knowing why. Some would have called him old-fashioned. He still hand-wrote his reports and kept a real paper notebook in his uniform pocket. Friendly, calm, thoughtful, Miles wasn't just a cop. He was part of the village fabric. The kind of man who knew your dog's name, your late uncle's birthday, and where you liked to sit at the pub. Pendle Ash wasn't the kind of place where serious crimes happened. The last incident was when 2 teenagers stole a lawn gnome and painted it blue. Crime in the village was mostly noise complaints, missing cats, and the occasional drunk falling asleep on someone else's porch. Other officers would have died of boredom. Not Miles. He loved every second of it. The village itself was the kind you'd see in a travel magazine, a medieval church at the center, cobbled streets lined with cottages older than most countries, and even a pub called the White Witch, with a creaky sign and a fireplace that had been burning since the 1700s. At the edge of town, a small river meandered through fields and woods. In the golden haze of summer evenings, it felt more like a memory than a place. But not everything was as picture-perfect as it seemed. Pendle Ash had a youth problem. Nothing criminal, just restless. Teenagers bored out of their minds in a place where excitement was a 2-for-1 tea special. The church tried youth discos. The villagers objected to the noise. And so, the kids found their own fun, often in places they shouldn't. That night, it was the graveyard. Miles was halfway through his night shift, sipping lukewarm coffee, Harriet the station's fat tabby curled up on his lap like she owned him. He'd been doing paperwork for hours, because even paradise comes with forms in triplicate, when the station phone rang. That alone was strange. Nobody called this late unless something had gone sideways. Pendle Ash Police Station, he said, setting Harriet down with a grumble. Oh, Miles, it's Mrs. Whitcomb. He recognized her voice immediately. She was nearly 90 and still walked to church every morning, rain or shine. I hate to bother you this late, she said, but there's something unsettling happening in the cemetery. Miles sighed. Not again. Teenagers? Probably, she said. They're wearing black and lighting candles. It's disrespectful. My parents are buried there. So are half the people who built this village. I'm on my way. 10 minutes later, Miles pulled up at the cemetery gates. Sure enough, the flicker of candles danced between the gravestones, and somewhere in the shadows, the bass line of an old rock song thumped low and steady. He got out, flashlight in hand. Next to the cemetery was an ancient brick house, long abandoned. It used to belong to the cemetery caretaker, but the last one died before Miles was even born. Now, vines strangled the walls, windows hung broken like blind eyes, and rumors painted it as haunted. The local kids called it the Hollow House. Using his flashlight, Miles stepped carefully between the stones. The kids hadn't noticed him yet. There were maybe 6 of them, standing in a loose circle. Candles burned at their feet. Some were chanting. One was playing music from a Bluetooth speaker nestled in a cracked birdbath. He stepped closer. A girl shrieked and dropped her phone when his flashlight beam landed on her face. Evening, Miles said, calm but firm. You scared me half to death, the girl gasped. That's rich, Miles replied. Considering you're the ones in a graveyard trying to summon ghosts. A tall boy stepped forward, all bravado and bad attitude. It's none of your business. Actually, Miles said, shining the beam directly at him, it's very much my business, Alex. This is public ground. And disturbing the peace here? That's a crime. Alex's face twisted into a smirk. We're not hurting anyone. Not yet, Miles said, eyes narrowing. But this isn't just a field. These stones. They're people's lives. Memories. History. You want to wear black and light candles? Go do it at home. A smaller voice piped up behind Alex. We're just bored, that's all. It was Katie Lewis. 14. Sweet, usually quiet. Her being out this late made Miles frown. You should be home, Katie, he said gently. Your mum will be worried. She doesn't care, Katie muttered, looking at her shoes. Miles felt a stab in his chest. He'd heard that tone before, from kids who carried more weight than they should have to. You know, he said, softening, Pendle Ash has a long history with witches. You might be surprised who you're playing without H. 3 days after the cemetery incident, the air in Pendle Ash had grown heavier, one of those sticky summer spells when everything feels slow, like time's walking through syrup. Miles was finishing his afternoon patrol. He liked working day shifts. More people to talk to. More chances to check in on the elderly folks who always had fresh beans or gossip to offer. He'd already walked Harriet the cat off the front step of the station twice. She had a habit of sunbathing right where people needed to step. He'd just accepted a bundle of green beans from Mr. Hampton, the village's unofficial vegetable ambassador, when his phone rang. Fielding, he answered, tucking the beans under one arm. It was Chief Inspector Blackwood, calling from headquarters in Preston. Gruff voice, permanently annoyed, even on good days. We've had a report from the Osborne Gallery, he barked. Someone broke in. Stole a painting. Miles blinked. The Osborne Gallery? You know it? I haven't been in years. My ex used to drag me there. Perfect. Then you'll love going back. Get over there and take a statement. We'll send a crime scene team later if we have anyone free. And just like that, the line went dead. Miles sighed, shoved the beans into the station fridge, and grabbed his keys. As he got into the car and hit the siren, a mix of adrenaline and memory stirred in his chest. The gallery. He hadn't thought about it in a long time. Not since Sarah. She'd loved that place. Could spend hours in front of a single painting, tracing brushstrokes with her eyes like they were whispered confessions. Sarah had been an art restorer. Brilliant. Focused. Beautiful in a way that made you want to study her the way she studied light on canvas. They'd been together for 2 years. Then she got a job offer in Boston. And he had a badge in Pendle Ash and roots too deep to pull up. She left. He stayed. He hadn't been back to the gallery since. The Osborne Gallery was housed in a grand old manor just outside the village. Ivy curled around the wrought iron gates. The trees whispered secrets in the breeze. It looked less like a gallery and more like a dream someone had once painted and forgotten. 2 women met him at the front steps, both older, both clearly shaken. Sergeant Fielding, thank goodness, one of them exclaimed. I'm Joan Potts. This is Lottie Bingley. We work here. Inside, Miles said gently. Let's talk somewhere quiet. The reception room was cozy, with lace curtains and the smell of old books. Lottie looked pale, perched on the edge of a wooden chair like it might reject her at any moment. It was my fault, she said suddenly. Lottie, Joan scolded, but Lottie held up a hand. No. I left the reception desk. I shouldn't have, but we had new paintings delivered for the summer exhibition. I got excited. I went upstairs. Just for a few minutes. When I came down, it was gone. Miles frowned. No one else came in. No visitors all morning, Joan said. It was quiet. Too quiet. No security cameras. Joan shook her head. We're small. Cameras are expensive. We never thought, Miles raised a hand. Let's take a look at where the painting was hung. They led him into one of the gallery's back rooms. The building was charmingly uneven, creaky floors, narrow halls, wood-paneled walls that whispered of centuries past. In the center of one wall, surrounded by emptiness, was a single nail. The kind that once held meaning. It was called Summer, Joan said quietly. By Butterworth. That name rang a bell. Tristan Butterworth. The post-war painter. Yes. He lived nearby. We have the largest collection of his work in the country. I'll need a photograph, Miles said. To send out alerts. I'll fetch one, Lottie said, hurrying away. Miles stood in front of the blank space where the painting had hung. Funny how absence could feel louder than presence. Like the silence after a scream. A few moments later, Lottie returned with a large print. This is Summer, she said, handing it over like a sacred object. Miles studied the image. A golden field. A river glinting in the sun. Trees leaning toward each other like old friends. And beneath one of them, a woman. Alone. Serene. Wearing a pale yellow dress and a wide-brimmed hat. Her face turned slightly away, but her profile was delicate. Soft. Timeless. Something about it tugged at him. It's beautiful, he murmured. She was his wife, Joan said. Sylvia. Tristan painted her in many of his works. That one's from 1951. Miles nodded slowly. I'll do everything I can to get her back. He didn't know why he said her instead of it. Maybe because in that moment, it didn't feel like just a painting. Back in his patrol car, Miles rested the photograph of Summer on the passenger seat. For a few moments, he just stared at it. The woman beneath the tree, Sylvia, looked peaceful, content. Yet something in her posture, the tilt of her head, the way her hand curled over the grass, it all felt too intentional to be just an artist's whim. He shook the thought away and called Chief Inspector Blackwood. She was painted by Tristan Butterworth, Miles explained. The gallery says it's one of his most known works. You're sure this isn't just a local prank? Blackwood asked, already impatient. The painting's valued at over £20,000. Blackwood grunted. All right. Notify the art loss register. Get it in the database. I don't have anyone to spare right now, so you're handling it. We're stretched thin. London's on high alert. I can manage, Miles replied. But I think it's worth sending someone from forensics. At least to dust for prints. Blackwood let out an exaggerated sigh. Fine. I'll put in a request. But if it turns out to be nothing, it's on you. The line went dead. As he drove back toward the station, window down, air thick with the scent of honeysuckle and summer dust, Miles couldn't stop glancing at the photo beside him. Something about Sylvia's presence on that canvas stayed with him, clinging like smoke. She wasn't looking at the viewer. She was looking away. Into the distance. Toward something unseen. What were you thinking about? He found himself wondering. Back at the station, he immediately filed the stolen artwork with the art loss register, entering every detail Joan and Lottie had given him. Then he made copies of the photo and pinned one to the bulletin board behind his desk. Harriet, the cat, hopped onto the filing cabinet nearby and stared at him with something dangerously close to judgment. Miles barely noticed. By mid-afternoon, the forensics officer had arrived from the city, late 20s, earbuds in, smelling faintly of aftershave and cynicism. You expecting me to find anything useful in a place with no cameras and a dozen pensioners touching paintings all day? He asked as he unpacked his kit. Just give it your best, Miles said. Maybe we get lucky. Sure. Or maybe you're thieves halfway to Morocco with a canvas under their arm. Miles left him to it and headed back out into the village. For the next 2 days, he became a man obsessed. He pinned up signs. Knocked on every door within walking distance of the gallery. Visited every antique shop and art dealer within a 40-mile radius. Showed Sylvia's image to strangers and asked questions that made him sound more romantic than professional. Have you seen this painting? Anyone come by trying to sell it? No, sorry. Pretty woman, though. You all right, Sergeant? He sent the photo to colleagues in Preston, Manchester, even London. He dropped copies at auction houses, framed galleries, even a cafe that displayed local artwork near the coast. Everyone promised to keep an eye out. Still, nothing. And yet, every time Miles looked at Summer, something inside him stirred. It was irrational. Illogical. But it was real. By the third day, other officers began to tease him. You sure she's not your new girlfriend? One asked, laughing as Miles stared again at the pinned-up photo during lunch. Even Harriet had stopped curling in his lap, sensing, perhaps, that she was no longer the center of his universe. He stopped chatting with the villagers. Stopped joining the others for tea. Whenever he wasn't at work, he was driving to antique fairs, second-hand art shops, flea markets, anywhere someone might be hiding a stolen painting with a woman lost in thought beneath a summer tree. Then, 5 days after the theft, his phone rang. It was Joan. Her voice was frantic. Miles, it's Lottie. She's in hospital. Someone broke in again. Another painting's gone. And this time they hurt her. He was out the door before she finished speaking. The next morning, the sun broke over Pendle Ash in a soft golden hush. It should have felt peaceful, but to Miles, the light felt too bright, the stillness too sharp. He hadn't slept. Instead, he sat at his kitchen table with the photograph of evening in June laid out in front of him, alongside a cup of cold coffee, and by the time Miles arrived at the gallery, it had already been sealed off with yellow tape. The wind rustled the old trees as if whispering what had happened. Joan stood near the doorway, arms wrapped tightly around herself, her cheeks streaked with tears and windburn. They pushed her, Miles, she said the moment he stepped out of the car. Lottie heard something, came down the stairs, and someone shoved her. Hard. She fell all the way down. Is she conscious? Joan shook her head. No. They're not sure how bad the head injury is yet. She broke her leg, too. Miles swore under his breath, then glanced toward the entrance. What's missing? Joan hesitated, then opened the gallery door and led him inside. In here, she said softly, guiding him toward the same back room where Summer had once hung. Another space. Another blank rectangle on the wall. The painting was called Evening in June, she said. And let me guess, Miles muttered. Sylvia. Joan nodded slowly. She's in this one too. Sitting on a terrace with a book in her hands. Wearing a violet dress. He stared at the void on the wall, already seeing it in his mind. I have a photo, Joan added, reaching into her handbag with shaking hands. We made backups after the last theft. She handed it to him, and when his eyes met the image, something in his chest tightened. Sylvia was seated outside a charming country house, teacups on the table beside her, a slice of strawberry cake, the sun melting into golden hills in the background. She looked older than in summer, but not by much. Her hair was pinned in soft waves, her expression calm. As if she knew someone would come looking for her. Miles didn't say anything. He just stared. 2 paintings. 2 thefts. Same woman. Same obsession. Someone's collecting her, he said quietly. Joan looked up, startled. You think the thief is targeting Sylvia? I do now. Joan folded her arms. Sylvia and Tristan were married, you know. She was his muse. Some people say his entire style changed after she died. Do we know much about her? There's an archive upstairs, Joan said. Letters, exhibition notes, old photos. If there's a clue to be found, it's in there. I want to see it. Joan gave him a small nod, then handed him a set of keys. "I have to get back to the hospital," she said. "They're letting me sit with Lottie for a few hours. Call me if you find anything." "I will," Miles promised. After she left, the silence inside the gallery felt heavier than usual. Like the house was holding its breath. He locked the door, checked the alarm system, and headed upstairs. The archive room was small, tucked behind a crooked hallway. Filing cabinets lined the walls. A single desk lamp glowed over a cluttered table. Dust floated in the slant of late afternoon light. This, Miles thought, was where the story lived. He made coffee in the tiny kitchenette, then opened the first drawer. Photographs. Dozens of them. Mostly black and white, some in faded color. Sylvia in the garden. Sylvia in front of a lake. Sylvia with Tristan, laughing, dancing, holding hands. On the back of each photo, neat handwriting noted dates and places. Windermere, 1949. Kentmere, 1952. Pendle Ash, 1955. She was stunning. Not just in the obvious way. There was something timeless about her. Graceful, but grounded. The kind of woman who'd hold your gaze and ask a question you'd never forget. Some photos showed her older. Her hair up. Elegant in a post-war kind of way, pearls, gloves, long coats. But her smile never changed. And the more Miles looked, the more he felt that impossible tug in his chest. Like he knew her. Like he'd always known her. He shook his head and opened another drawer. Letters this time. Most of them signed by Tristan. Some from galleries, others from collectors. A few were personal, written in looping, romantic cursive. And then he found a folder labeled simply, S. Butterworth, Notes. Inside were articles, transcribed interviews, and one particularly strange note in Joan's handwriting, greater than subject of local lore, Sylvia said to have disappeared from public life around 1956. No known date of death. No burial record found. No obituary. Miles frowned. That couldn't be right. He went back to the photos. Checked the dates. The last one was marked summer, 1956. Sylvia under a cherry tree, laughing at someone off camera. And after that, nothing. No later images. No mention of illness or accidents. Just silence. Miles leaned back in the chair, heart thudding a little harder than it should have. 2 paintings stolen. 1 woman in both. And now, a mystery almost 70 years old wrapped around her name. Where did Sylvia Butterworth? A half-eaten piece of toast. Sylvia smiled back at him through the decades, frozen in that lavender dress, lost in a book while the world slipped away around her. He kept coming back to that note. No date of death. No grave. No obituary. How does a woman like that simply vanish? Before heading out, Miles stopped by the hospital. Lottie was still unconscious, sedated for pain. Joan sat beside her, reading softly from a dog-eared mystery novel, her voice trembling slightly at the edges. "She's tough," Miles said gently. "She'll wake up." Joan nodded but didn't look up. "I'll find out who did this," he added. "I promise." He left before his own voice could shake. Back at the station, there was a message waiting on his desk. A man visited the gallery this morning asking about Butterworth paintings. Didn't leave a name. Tall, early 60s, very polite. Said he was just passing through. We thought it was strange. He didn't seem too surprised when we mentioned the theft. The note was signed by one of the junior officers on early patrol. Miles stood still for a moment, the words sinking in like a stone in water. He came back. Not to steal. To check. He left instructions to alert him immediately if the man returned, then grabbed his coat and headed back to the gallery. There was something else pulling him there, too. A feeling he couldn't explain. Like someone was waiting. Joan had left him the keys again. The moment he stepped into the archive room, the air felt different. Heavy. Expectant. Dust motes spiraled in the light like whispers trying to take shape. He returned to the Sylvia file. Pulled out the last few letters written by Tristan before his death in 1982. Most of them were polite correspondence with galleries or friends. Except one. Folded at the very back. Addressed, not to a person, but to himself. The handwriting was messier. Darker. Written in a trembling hand. Greater than, she's still with me. I see her every time I close my eyes. They said she was gone. That she left. But I know better. She wouldn't leave. She promised. They say I lost my mind, but I lost her. That's not the same. Miles read the letter 3 times. Then he looked at the last sentence, underlined 3 times in ink, greater than, the truth is in the painting. She left a piece of herself behind. He leaned back slowly, the chair creaking under him. Was this grief? Dementia? Or was Tristan Butterworth trying to say something no one ever understood? He stood and pulled the 2 prints from the wall, summer and evening in June. Held them side by side. Same woman. Same delicate strength in her face. Same sadness in her eyes, now that he looked closer. And then he noticed something. In both paintings, she wore a gold pendant. Oval. Subtle. Almost easy to miss. In summer, it caught the light like a spark. In evening, it was tucked beneath the lace edge of her dress, just barely visible. Miles leaned in. The design wasn't just decoration. It looked like an eye. No, not just an eye. An eye within a triangle. He'd seen that before. In old folk books. In gallery pamphlets. In legends. The symbol of the Watcher. An ancient motif found in mystic art, said to appear when someone was guarding something, or someone, beyond death. His heart pounded. He dropped the photos, grabbed his phone, and called Joan. Did Sylvia wear a pendant? He asked. There was a pause. Yes. I think so. I remember seeing it in one of the real photographs. Does the pendant have a symbol on it? Another pause. Then, a triangle with an eye. Why? He didn't answer. Instead, he hung up and walked back to the desk. Opened the file drawer of photographs again. Sifted through images of Sylvia, his hands moving faster now, scanning for the pendant. And then he found it. A picture dated 1955. Sylvia smiling beside an ivy-covered wall. Her hand resting lightly on her chest. The pendant was perfectly visible. Not just painted. Real. The triangle. The eye. Identical. He traced the shape with his thumb. The truth is in the painting. This wasn't just a collection of stolen artwork anymore. Someone wasn't stealing art. They were trying to reconstruct her. Piece by piece. Miles drove out of Pendle Ash just before noon, following a tip from a gallery contact in Preston. A man fitting the description given by the junior officer, early 60s, tall, gray-haired, expensive coat, had inquired at an antique shop about Butterworth originals. He hadn't given a name, just a soft smile and a foreign-sounding accent. But what stood out was this: he hadn't asked if the paintings were for sale. He asked if they were safe. That was enough for Miles. The antique shop sat on a quiet lane near the old train station in Preston. Inside, the place smelled of old paper and lavender wax. The aisles were lined with narrow cabinets of porcelain, dusty books, and oddities that seemed to whisper forgotten secrets. Behind the counter stood a small man with rounded glasses and a voice like velvet. "You're looking for the gentleman with the leather gloves, aren't you?" he asked before Miles even spoke. Miles gave a short nod. "You remember him?" "Oh, yes. Polite. Well-dressed. Looked like he'd stepped out of a London club in 1955. Asked about Butterworth. Very specific. Very calm. Did he buy anything? No. But he left this. The man handed over a thin card, cream-colored with a pressed gold seal in the corner. A private art collector's emblem. No name. No phone number. Just a set of initials, EC, and on the back, the shopkeeper said, flipping it over, he wrote a single line. Miles took the card and read the handwriting. Greater than Sylvia is not gone. She's waiting. His pulse quickened. Did he say anything else? He mentioned the lost third piece. Said it was closer than anyone knew. Miles stood very still. Third piece? He didn't elaborate. But I know Butterworth. He only ever painted Sylvia a handful of times. 2 of the works were known. Maybe 3, if you include a private commission. What kind of commission? Supposedly, in 1956, he painted something for her. A portrait, but different. Not landscape. Not symbolic. Just her. And it was never exhibited. Some say it was destroyed. Others think it was hidden. Only rumors. Miles felt his mouth go dry. Any idea where it could be now? The shopkeeper gave a mysterious smile. If I knew that, Sergeant, I wouldn't be selling teaspoons and old lamps. Back in the car, Miles sat in silence for a long time, holding the card between his fingers. EC, whoever that was, they believed Sylvia wasn't just a subject. They believed she was still out there. In some form. Was it madness? Or did they know something he didn't? He drove back to the gallery, the road blurring as thoughts churned. The lost third painting. The pendant. The symbol of the watcher. Back in the archive room, he dug through the Butterworth exhibition notes again. This time, he searched not for dates, but gaps. Years when Tristan didn't exhibit, didn't sell, didn't paint publicly. There it was. 1956. One note from a London gallery, greater than, we reached out for submissions, but Mr. Butterworth declined. Said he was working on something intensely personal. Something not for public eyes that matched. And then, beneath it, a letter from a gallery curator in Bath. Greater than, Tristan visited unexpectedly. Asked if we could store a painting without naming it. Insisted it never be listed in our collection. Miles's heart nearly stopped. The letter included an address. An old storage house still maintained by the Bath Art Council. He called immediately. Yes, we still hold historic items, said the woman on the other end. But access requires clearance, either family permission or a police inquiry. And it would have to be in person. Miles didn't hesitate. He booked the next train to Bath. Before he left, he returned to the hospital. Lottie was still asleep, but Joan sat reading beside her as always. She looked up as he stepped in. I think I know where the third painting is, he said. Joan blinked. There's a third. Miles nodded. And if I find it? I think I'll finally understand what this is all about. Joan stood slowly. Miles, be careful. He met her gaze. I will. That night, as the train carried him south through the sleeping countryside, he pulled out the 2 photos again, summer and evening in June. He stared at Sylvia's face. And in the reflection of the train window, he thought, for just a second, he saw her looking back. The train rolled into Bath just after noon. Miles stepped out onto the platform with a travel-wrinkled blazer, a single bag slung over his shoulder, and a mind that wouldn't stop spinning. For the first time in his career, he didn't feel like a policeman chasing a criminal. He felt like a man chasing a ghost. The storage facility was tucked behind the museum district, a converted carriage house with thick stone walls and leaded glass windows. The receptionist was young, bright-eyed, and slightly baffled by the letter Miles handed her from the Pendle Ash police station. "You're here for an unlisted Butterworth?" she asked. "I believe it was placed here in 1956, he replied. She tilted her head. "I've worked here 3 years and never heard of it." "Sounds about right." She disappeared into the back, and for a long time there was only silence, broken by the distant hum of a climate control unit. Then, "Sergeant." Her voice echoed slightly. "You'll want to see this." He followed her into a narrow corridor lined with steel doors. She unlocked one, stepped aside, and let him in. The room was dimly lit. Humidified. Smelled of dust, linen, and time. And in the center, propped carefully against a padded wall, was a single canvas draped in soft muslin cloth. Miles stepped forward. Heart racing. Hand steady. He pulled back the cloth. And there she was. Sylvia. But not like before. No soft smile. No sunlight. No books or teacups or flowers. Just her. Facing forward. Painted from the waist up. Eyes fixed on the viewer. Hands folded in her lap. The pendant resting perfectly in the hollow of her throat. And behind her, nothing. Just a blank, endless space that made her figure almost float on the canvas. It was arresting. It was haunting. And it felt alive. He stepped back, breath caught in his chest. There was something different in this painting. The others showed Sylvia existing. But this one felt like she was watching. As if she knew someone would find her. Someone would bring her back. He didn't notice the man until he heard the quiet click of a door behind him. "Beautiful, isn't she?" a voice said softly. Miles turned. The man stood in the doorway. Gray hair. Long black coat. Gloves. Calm eyes that had seen far too much. The same man from the antique shop. "You must be EC, Miles said. The man smiled. "Edward Callahan. Art historian. Collector. Protector, depending who you ask. You're the one who's been following the paintings." "I'm not the thief," Callahan replied, raising both hands. "I haven't taken anything. Only followed what was already vanishing. 2 stolen pieces. 1 injured woman." "Why?" Callahan stepped closer, gaze locked on the portrait. "Because she was never meant to be forgotten." Miles frowned. "Sylvia?" Callahan nodded slowly. "She was more than a muse, Sergeant. More than a woman in a yellow dress. Tristan didn't just love her, he tried to preserve her. The pendant she wore. It wasn't just jewelry. It was an ancient sigil. From before Christianity. The symbol of the Watcher. A guardian of souls." Miles felt a chill crawl up his spine. "That's mythology." Callahan's smile widened just slightly. "So is half the truth in this world. But I've studied symbols my entire life. And I've followed this one across countries, across generations. It always appears when someone refuses to let go. When memory tries to defy mortality." He stepped closer to the portrait. "Tristan painted this in secret. Not to exhibit. Not to sell. But to anchor her." "Anchor?" Callahan turned toward him. "To keep her here. Somehow. In brushstroke. In pigment. In presence." Miles looked back at the painting. Sylvia's eyes hadn't changed. He couldn't tell if they were sad, or waiting. "You believe she's still here?" he asked quietly. "I don't know what I believe anymore," Callahan admitted. "But someone out there is trying to gather her again. Piece by piece. And I'm trying to make sure she isn't consumed in the process." Miles stepped between him and the painting. "You've followed the trail. But so have I. And if someone's stealing these, hurting people to get them, then this is a case. A real one. Not just legend. Callahan didn't argue. Then let me help you, he said. Miles hesitated. What's the last step, he asked. Callahan looked at him with something between sadness and reverence. To reunite all three. If the last two were taken, then this one won't stay safe for long. Miles looked back at Sylvia's portrait. He knew. This was the final piece. The bait. The answer. And possibly the beginning of something neither of them fully understood. They moved the painting that night. Miles and Callahan loaded it carefully into the back of Miles' patrol car, wrapped in new cloth, sealed in a weatherproof case. It didn't feel like transporting art. It felt like carrying someone asleep. Back in Pendle Ash, the gallery had been closed since the second theft. Joan insisted they store the painting there temporarily, in the upstairs archive room where the other Butterworth pieces had once lived. They set it against the back wall, beneath the soft glow of a single lamp. Sylvia's painted eyes watched the room silently. Callahan stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She'll draw them, he said. Whoever it is. The one behind this. They'll come. Miles nodded. Let them. He installed a hidden motion sensor, positioned 2 small security cameras, and slept on a camp bed just outside the room. Harriet the cat wandered past at midnight, gave the portrait a long look, and disappeared again like a shadow with opinions. Nothing happened the first night. Or the second. But on the third night, at precisely 2:41 a.m., the sensor beeped. Miles sat up instantly. He checked the monitor. Movement. Inside the gallery. Someone was there. He moved quickly and quietly, radio off, flashlight in hand, pistol holstered. Callahan was already awake, standing at the stairs in a long black robe, as if he'd been expecting this. You stay, Miles whispered. I've got this. He crept down the steps. The door to the archive room was open. The figure stood in front of Sylvia's portrait, motionless, gloved fingers tracing the air just inches from the canvas. They were small, shorter than he expected. Slim. Quick. Step away, Miles said, voice calm but full of weight. The figure turned. And in the pale beam of the flashlight, he saw her. Not a man. A woman. Late 40s. Pale. Hollow-cheeked, with eyes that looked like they'd been crying for years. Please, she said. Don't stop me. Miles didn't lower his light. You hurt someone. I didn't mean to. Her voice broke. I just wanted her back. You're the thief. She nodded once. I only took the pieces with Sylvia. Nothing else. I left the gallery untouched. Who are you? She stepped forward. Slowly. My name is Eloise. I'm her granddaughter. Miles froze. What? She had a daughter. My mother. No one knew. It was kept quiet. After Tristan died, everything fell apart. Sylvia vanished from public life. Changed her name. Raised my mother alone. And when she died, my mother couldn't talk about it. But I found her letters. Her sketches. I found her. Miles stared at her, stunned. She was real, Eloise said, voice trembling. More than real. She was otherworldly. Everyone knew it. That's why he painted her again and again. He didn't want to lose her. And neither do I, you could have told someone. No one would believe me. Not without her. She turned to the painting. I only ever wanted to put her back together. All 3 pieces. Reunited. So she could rest. Callahan stepped into the doorway then, quiet as shadow. Did you believe she'd return? He asked softly. I don't know, Eloise whispered. But I had to try. Silence settled. Miles lowered the light. They stood there, 3 people, a painting, and 70 years of longing, wrapped in a moment that didn't feel entirely like it belonged to this world. Finally, Miles spoke. "You're turning yourself in." She nodded. "Yes. But the paintings stay here," he added. "Together." And she nodded again. "That's all I wanted." Weeks passed. Lottie recovered slowly, her memory of the attack blurred and broken. Joan returned to the gallery, this time with proper security. The Butterworth room was restored, summer, evening in June, and the unnamed portrait of Sylvia finally reunited. Callahan disappeared after that. Left a single note: "Some things can only be protected from afar." Eloise was charged, but given a suspended sentence. The judge called it a case unlike any other. The public called it haunting, tragic, poetic. The gallery reopened with record attendance. People came from across the country to see the 3 paintings. And every time Miles walked past that room, he felt it, Sylvia's presence. Watching. Waiting. Still there. And somehow, at peace. One late evening, as golden light poured through the old windows, Miles sat in front of Sylvia's portrait. Harriet curled at his feet. The room was quiet, warm, still. He stared at her face. Not as a detective. Not even as a man obsessed. Just as someone who had once lost something too. And now understood how far someone would go to feel whole again. "I think you were never really gone," he said softly. Then stood. And left her with the sunset.